Very excited about our next guest and have been looking for the right opportunity to invite him on. He is the agricultural industry commentator, Keith Woodford. Now, Keith predicted the global dairy disruptor that would become A2 milk, and new research findings have then gone on to prove that it's not just digestive health benefits, but the evidence demonstrating that A1 beta-casein, which is A1 milk, is not only pro-inflammatory, but is now linked to autoimmune conditions, asthma, and lung conditions. As I said, agricultural commentator Keith Woodford, who has held the position of honorary professor in agri-food systems here at Lincoln University, joins us now. Good evening, sir. Thank you for taking the time to join us.
Good evening, Sarah.
Now,
and to all your listeners.
Keith, we've got a bit to cover here, but while I've got you here, I might throw you a few curly questions across the industry as well, because I know that you can answer anything. But firstly, this A1, A2 research specifically into inflammatory properties, how long has that been underway?
We've known that A1 is inflammatory for close on 10 years. And one of the early studies I was actually involved with, it was done at AgResearch, but I got roped into it. So we've had lots of evidence for a long time that it's pro-inflammatory and it affects the way the immune system works. But it's just been a case of putting together one bit of evidence after another. It tended to be evidence that people didn't want to hear, so it hasn't always been as widely heard as it could have been. But recently we've had another bit of that evidence come through, which is published by Nature Research, which makes it a bit harder to ignore. And this particular work was done with mice, and that's because whoever it was done on had to make the supreme sacrifice at the end, so that all their bits and pieces could be analysed. So this one was done with mice. But the interesting thing was that although we knew all about this pro-inflammatory stuff, no one had ever looked at it in relation to asthma. And what this study has shown is that the A1 milk sets up all the same biochemical reactions that occur in humans and almost all species, but then it makes you more susceptible to asthma. It's not necessarily saying that it's the fundamental cause of asthma, but it predisposes people to getting asthma. So it's another part of another little bit of the jigsaw that's just all coming together over time.
Okay, just for those who are listening who don't know the difference between A1 and A2, and a quick summary and the difference in terms of the animal type that are more native to A2, could you explain that?
Yes, well, all animals originally were A2, and even now all sheep, goats, horses and humans produce milk that is A2. So do African cattle, so do Asian cattle. But a lot of the European cattle, or cattle of European origin, like we have in New Zealand, as a result of a mutation probably several thousand years ago, produce a different version of beta-casein. And when that beta-casein digests, it releases a little opioid fragment, we call it a peptide, but just think of it as a fragment, and then that does all sorts of funny things in the system. So I've been arguing for 15 years now that we need to be shifting our cattle to A2. It's not hard to do. The major breeding companies are all on board now, but in New Zealand we were defensive for a long time. We chose to see it as a threat rather than an opportunity. We're still not making the best use out of it. Our farmers should be getting paid a lot more for A2 milk. The big international companies who can't get it from New Zealand but they're getting it from farmers that I know in other parts of the world. Those farmers are getting big premiums, and New Zealand farmers aren't.
Keith, in terms of that defensiveness, I totally agree with you. And I have been on the other end of interviewing certain industry people in the last couple of years that in the dairy industry that have came out and said, oh, people who can't stomach real milk, they're just a minority. As I was saying, the older I get, the less I can consume. And I do not want to have plant-based milk. So hence A2 and lactose-free milk has been a saviour for me. Let's talk about that how far the industry's come in your mind. You've been in this game a long time, Keith. We're all jumping up and down at the moment about how we've become wonderful collaborators. What do you believe? Do you think that's true?
Well, what do you mean by collaborators? Who's collaborating and with who?
I'd say between interdisciplinary science as well as pan-sector industry bodies coming together on similar issues, those types of things.
Yes, there's a lot of talk and a lot of words. I suppose one of the things I've been thinking about just recently is that a lot of people are saying, for example, we have to diversify away from China for various reasons. And I say, yes, well and good, but where are you going to diversify to? Because all these other places are not quite so easy. China is actually a remarkably easy place to do business, and that's why our rural exports increased so much to China. If we want to succeed in some of the other, for example, the ASEAN countries like Indonesia, Vietnam, Philippines, there's 10 of them altogether, the ASEAN countries, we have to learn how to collaborate with supply chain partners in those countries. And I've been thinking quite a lot about that lately as I go for walks around the hills, that we really aren't very good at collaborating with value chain partners. And that's one of the reasons why we still end up selling lots of our product at auction and transaction based rather than getting the premium. Very hard for us to develop markets in those countries. So we do need to collaborate with the local people in those supply chains.
And before we go, Keith, what's your thoughts on agri-food systems and the ongoing commentary around what is regenerative agriculture in its term, as well as what does it mean for New Zealand's farming systems?
Well, I think we've always in New Zealand tried to have farming systems that made sense ecologically, and that's why we used white clover. We use that less now. I think we've still got quite a lot of challenges from an ecological perspective and things we need to do. And so in that context, yes, it's great to be talking about regenerative agriculture, but sometimes I think that people are saying the word without really knowing what they even themselves mean by it. So, there's a lot of people in the rural community, the urban community, that keep talking about, oh yes, all these things farmers have got to do, but they don't actually have a very high knowledge level. Just this afternoon, this might be sort of a bit aside and a bit irrelevant, but I just happened to be coming home in the car and I had the national radio on, and there I heard Steve Wynne-Irwin from Hawke's Bay. Of course, he's a commentator on Farmers Weekly as well. But he was just talking about some of the things that he's been doing on his farm. And I thought, as I was driving along, I thought, this is wonderful because he's got an audience there of probably some hundreds of thousands of liberal
urban people listening to National. Yep.
Absolutely. And I thought, what a job we've still got in the rural, those who are in the rural sort of part of the community, to try and increase the understanding in the urban community about what it really is all about.
Thank you so much for taking the time to join us, Keith. Now, I have to ask, is that a Hallswell quarry behind you? Because that noise has been very interesting in the background. Or is someone picking up your recycling? No? There's not a bit of a grumbling dump truck out the back?
Well, yeah, what you're referring to there, but yeah, the Hallswell Quarry Park is just a couple of 100 metres from our home, and that's a wonderful resource, and it has been remarkable over the last few weeks how many people are using that resource. That I think the people of Christchurch, anyway, are really getting out into the outdoors in a way they haven't done before.
Oh, I know, and they've still got a big Banks Peninsula to explore. You never see anyone out there, do you, Keith?
I'm often out there with my wife.
It's lovely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Keith. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll catch up soon and continue the conversation. There's a few issues we've got to work our way through. Now, there's Keith Woodford, agricultural commentator and, of course, big advocate for A2 milk and has been for decades.
This is Sarah's Country.